Oh, wait, now it's giving me the button. Parent to live stream the webinar. You're still there, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's loading the new screen. Setting up your webinar for custom streaming. Done. Redirecting the live streaming page. I never seen none of this. Oh, yeah, we could be live. I think we're live.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, I think so. Let's just make sure.
Are we live? I don't see it yet, but
yeah, we're live.
Oh, hey, happy MLK Day, everybody.
Yo, what's up, everybody? So I'm per usual, I'm always trying to figure out this live streaming stuff. You know what I mean? So they said it was loading, but I think we're good. So what's up, everybody? Welcome to What Do You Mean, the live hangout. And tonight we got a special guest in the building. His name is Vocab Malone. Vocab, say what's up, man.
Thank you for having me on the show, John McCrae.
Hey, you're welcome, brother. For those of you that don't know who Vocab Malone is, Vocab is my boy, and we're going to talk about what he does here in a minute. We're going to be talking about the Israelites, but I just want to wait another minute to get people into the chat or into the thing. So let's just wait a minute for people to join. And taking a look at the live chat, we have we have Carrie. Carrie, what's up, Carrie? Carrie is a helper of mine, which she's awesome. Her and her husband actually run our Parler account, which is awesome. So it's good to see you here. Carrie Atala. And then also we got, let's see, Doc Funny. Doc Funny, what's up, my man? Doc Funny, good to see you, man. Doc Funny is an awesome supporter of the channel on Patreon and is an awesome guy in general. Appreciate him.
I know he is. I know he is. Shout out to you, Doc Funny.
That's right. That's right. I thought I saw Nate. Maybe I saw something else. We got,
Nate's up in there. Shout out to Nate. Yeah,
Nate. That's what I thought. Nate, what's up, my man? And Carm, what's up, Carm? Yeah, so we got a lot of the regulars in here too, which is really good. Oh yeah, there's Nate. There he goes. So, all right, guys. So, all right, we got a couple more people logging in here, and yeah, so let's get right to it. So, what's up, meme team? Good to see you guys all tonight on this Monday night. Hope everybody had a good day today. A lot of you guys are probably off work. I wasn't off work, but I think most people are work off today, which is good. So. Hope you guys got the rest that you needed. So let's just get right into it. So Vocab Malone is my guest tonight. Vocab Malone is also my boy. We've done a lot of stuff together. We've done a lot of videos together, and on David Wood's channel, on Vocab's channel, a couple of my channel. So we've done a lot together, but Vocab actually happens to be a researcher who specializes in the Black Hebrew Israelites. Vocab, what else do people need to know about you?
Well, I got a book on the topic. I always forget to promote it. The
Yes,
book.
sir.
So, oh, hey, look at you. All right. Yeah, it's really a primer, and I am working on my second book, and I've been working on it for a minute, and I was going through it, and I realized I was writing it too high. We're talking chapters upwards of 5,000 to 7,000 words per chapter, all this kind of stuff, and I've recently laid this book out to make it way more user-friendly. So there is progress on the book, which I'm potentially going to call Do Your Research, but we'll see what I call it. But it's going to deal with the underlying causes of some of these strange urban cults and then focus on the Hebrew Israelites within that context. So it's a bigger picture book than the first book.
Which is dope. I'm excited, man. Excited for that. Real quick, Google user. Welcome to the Meme Dream Team. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So Vocab, a lot of people here in the chat probably watching this video, I'd probably say a good amount of them probably know who the Black Hebrew Israelites are because they're familiar with me and familiar with your work through some of my stuff on the channel and stuff we've done together and all that. But for those that aren't familiar with the Black Hebrew Israelites, can you go ahead and just kind of give a summary, like a basic idea of what the Israelites believe?
Yeah, two key things I'll say. One is, firstly, that lineage has implications related to your standing with God. So basically, who you're descended from, who your father is, that matters when it comes to issues of salvation or issues relating to your standing before God. So lineage has theological consequences relating to salvation. That's the first thing. You have to understand Hebrew Israelites believe that. Otherwise, really, a lot of their beliefs would be actually of no consequence. If they didn't have that presupposition that who your father was made a difference in who you were before God, the rest of the beliefs actually would be, I'm not going to say totally irrelevant, but they'd be somewhat irrelevant. So that's the first thing. Secondly, Hebrew Israelites believe this, and these are the two things that all Hebrew Israelites have to believe. Otherwise, they don't really classify as full Hebrew Israelites, to be honest with you. The second thing is that peoples who are thought to be descendants of Africans who were kidnapped in the slave trade, those people are not actually African, but are the descendants of the true biblical Israelites. So those involved in transatlantic slave trade that ended up on the Western Hemisphere primarily are who I'm talking about. They believe that those people qualify as the true biblical Israelites. And notice the word true in there, John. Every Hebrew Israelite I've ever met, kind to rude, mean to not, whatever, all of them believe that modern day Jews are frauds, that they're imposters. And that's why I always say the word true biblical Israelites, because the idea is they're the true ones, other folks aren't. So those are really the two things. And then everything else is a grab bag. You don't know what you're going to get. That's why I learned the different camps and stuff to understand what they believe. But those are the two things right there.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's good. So now there's a lot of things we can get into. We can actually get into a lot of the theology later, but real quick, just so people know too. So when it comes to their doctrine, they actually pull, like when he's talking about from the slave Atlantic or from the Atlantic slave trade, the people that came over on the boat, they actually pull that from a verse in Deuteronomy 28. Is it 28:16 or 10 through 16? What is it, Vocab?
Oh yeah, Deuteronomy 28:68. That's 68. So what they do is they say the way that you are to identify who are the true people of God is what people in the modern era line up with the biblical picture of these people, the Israelites. And what they do is hopscotch throughout the Bible. I call it Hebrew hopscotch. That's actually what I call it. And one of the places they like to hopscotch to is Deuteronomy 28:68. And it says this, and the Lord will bring you back in ships to Egypt, a journey that I promised that you should never make again. And there you shall offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but there will be no buyer. That's the ESV. They like the KJV, but that's okay. So the deal with that is that they say if you read the curses that God promised would happen to Israel if they disobeyed, if you read that list of curses, they'll say that describes our people to a T. It doesn't describe the so-called fake Jews, they'll say. It describes our people to a T. And they come to this and they view it as sort of a capstone, cornerstone. And they'll say this right here is prophesying prophetically the transatlantic slave trade, because who else went into ships to be slaves? And you say, well, it says Egypt. They'll say Egypt is a word that simply means house of bondage. So it's simply a way to say back into slavery. They'll say that. And they go through, and when they're done, people were a lot of times pretty impressed. That's what Kendrick Lamar reportedly was blown away by, according to the Hebrew Israelite who proselytized him and did interviews about it. He said once he got to Deuteronomy 28:68, Kendrick Lamar and all the guys with him, their minds was blown. You know, somebody said my mic is peaking. I can turn down my mic on this end if that's the case. I'm going to turn down my mic on my end here.
Okay, I lost you for a sec on my end, but I think you might be okay. I'm not sure if it might be my end, but no, that's really good. So now even back to a little bit more basic behind that. So we're all on the same page. So Black Hebrew Israelites, you guys may be familiar with them if you've seen them on street corners. They're usually preaching, reading from the Bible, and they're yelling scriptures, usually from the Old Testament. Vocab, how else do we kind of describe them? They'll be in kind of different colors. Like typically they'll be in black if they're a certain camp, or purple and gold if they're a different camp. How else would you kind of describe them on the corners preaching?
Yeah, it's funny. You know a lot of these because you've been out in the street with me together. Yeah. By the way, everybody, give me a 1 if my mic is okay now. Give me a 2 if it's still peaking. You just described what are called One West camps. One Westers come out of a specific strand of Hebrew Israelism that has its roots in a Harlem-based school called the Commandment Keepers from 1919. And for 50 years, that school went along fine, I guess you could say. But in 1969, some key students left that school. And so 1969 begins what we call the One West Hebrew Israelites. And the reason why they're called One Westers is because they eventually moved to a dress in Harlem that began with One West. It's One West 125th Street. And that's where they formulated a lot of their doctrine. So they're called One West or One Westers to differentiate them from other Hebrew Israelites. People who don't know that terminology might say the radical guys, the angry guys, the militant guys, something like that. I'll give you examples. If you remember in the news, ladies and gentlemen, the Jersey City shooting, where David Anderson and Francine Graham went into JC Kosher Deli. That was the name, JC's Market. They went there. There was a kosher deli, but it's called a market. Anyways, they went there and just started unloading. And apparently they wanted to go to the yeshiva to kill Jewish students, but the doors were locked. So they went into the deli and said, killed 3 people inside, ended up killing a police officer earlier in the day, and had killed a livery driver the week before, plus themselves. So when it was all said and done, there was more than half a dozen people dead. And so that brought a lot of people's attention in the news media to Hebrew Israelites. They were influenced by One West Hebrew Israelism. There's my point by saying all that. And they were not attached to a camp at the time. But if you watch the security video, and John, I did a video on this, the man was wearing his camp garments. He doesn't have normal pants on. You can tell he has like what they call a garment. If you watch some of the security footage, and I show it in one of my videos that I did on this, the one that's actually on David Wood's channel, and it's on my channel too. On that video, you can see it. And so they were influenced by One West Hebrew Israelism. But that's not the only kind of Hebrew Israelites there are. That's just the ones that kind of get the most attention. Last thing I was saying this, John, you remember a year ago, John, when the high school kids with the red hats were labeled as staring down the Native American guy, and there was this big thing, and then it came out later that actually it was a group of Hebrew Israelites who had been harassing everybody the whole time, who were kind of the catalyst for this powder keg situation that happened in D.C. last year, actually right around this time. It was January of 2019. Those guys were from a group called House of Israel. They were also One Westers. And so that's kind of the One West MO. In fact, I've talked to the leader of that guy. He comes on some of the live streams. His name is Chief Ephraim, the guy who was the main guy involved with that Cummington case. And I don't know if people know, but Nick Sandman, the young guy who was labeled as, the with the punchable face and the smirk and all that, he actually won a grip of money from CNN. I believe it was CNN, one of the major news organizations. We're talking millions of dollars they settled out of court because he sued him because of all that. So anyways, Hebrew Israelites were involved with that as well. But that's not the only kind of Hebrew Israelites there are. We could talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. So let's talk real quick about a couple of famous Israelites. So some people that are kind of more famous, and then after that, maybe we'll talk about our experiences a little bit with Israelites as well. So now there's so recently, I guess too, the first kind of big Hebrew Israelite that I heard or whatever, and you can let me know if there's some bigger ones that's more recent too before then, but was Kendrick Lamar. In his CD, he started talking about being an Israelite. He says, like, don't call me black anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm an Israelite and all that too. Who are some other kind of famous Israelites?
Yeah, Kendrick Lamar was one. Some people might know Amari Stoudemire, but that's a little tricky because he's not involved with One West Hebrew Israelism and does not have the antagonistic views towards Israelis and Jews. In fact, when a lot of this anti-Semitism came out, Amari Stoudemire, former NBA basketball star, he played for Phoenix Suns for a while. He came out and said, "Hey, we got to stop this anti-Semitism in our ranks." So don't think he's still not a believer in Jesus Christ, but he doesn't mean he's a militant guy who would stand on the corner. So he's there as well. And then somebody actually who is actually in the news now is Kabir Gbaja-Biamala, a former Green Bay Packers, I believe, defensive end who had a pretty impressive sack record and has made it into the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame. He is actually in the news currently in some USA Today affiliate papers, I believe, in both Green Bay, the Green Bay Press Gazette, and in Tennessee, the Tennessean. And I've just got word that Sports Illustrated is interviewing people to do some kind of story on Kabir. Now, I don't think it's all about Hebrew Israelism, but I know it's going to feature in the story because he now is involved with a Hebrew Israelite group called Straightway Truth Ministries. And so if you're a Green Bay fan, you definitely know Kabir, or a big football fan, you know him. And this is current. This is unfolding right now, the story I'm talking about. So he's
Vocab, just so you know, I lost audio for some reason. I can't hear you anymore. So you keep talking about that while I'm figuring this out. All right.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. You let me know. Well, hey, everybody, I see the live chat here. So I see you guys here and your comments. I want to respectfully caution one person. I don't know who it was. I'm not trying to call anybody out. When we brought this up, somebody in the live chat just said, well, the Hebrew Israelites are uneducated. Well, it depends what you mean by that. And it's true, some are uneducated, but that sometimes can result in Christians letting their guard down when we just say, well, these guys are uneducated. And I want to caution everybody to not just think of Hebrew Israelites as, well, they're just uneducated. And there's a few reasons why. One is Hebrew Israelism has exploded in the past 5 to 10 years. Lifeway Research just came out with a survey last year that seems to be very, very evidenced. And one of the takeaways was that it's possible that there are over 1 million people in the United States of America who identify as Hebrew Israelites. That means there's a lot more people who self-identify with the ideology and would say, I'm a Hebrew Israelite in America than we thought. And then depending on how you run the numbers, because part of it depends how you tabulate certain demographics and what census data you use. I don't want to get all technical, but the point is there's 1.4 to 1.8 million people who identify in America as Hebrew Israelites. So as it's grown, it becomes more and more middle class. Middle class brings stability, and middle class also brings usually higher levels of education. So that is something I want to warn people about. And the perfect example is the man I just mentioned, Kabir. I just call him KGB because I always feel like I butcher his name, and I respect my Nigerian brothers and sisters, and I respect Kabir. I've even talked to him. You know, it's nothing personal when I bring this story up and all that, but I don't like to butcher his name, so I just say KGB. But anyways, he's a perfect example. Here's a man who's a former NFL star, and he's not the only one. There are a number of other. In fact, K-Dub just mentioned Jamal Charles, Daniel Muir, a grip of dudes, right, that are coming out as former NFL players who are now involved with this thing. That's important to recognize. And Straightway itself is filled with people who are educated, who own businesses, who you know, these aren't jobless people or anything like that. And so if people underestimate the adherents of Hebrew Israelism, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. Number two, even if a lot of Hebrew Israelites are not properly or technically educated, and that does lead to some problems sometimes, especially in their ability to discern sources, Hebrew Israelites have a very, very big problem. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to them, but they have a very big problem in discerning sources. And when I say a big problem, they don't know a good or bad source if it bites them in the nose.
Right. So Vocab, let's and if you covered this while I couldn't hear, sorry, but can we talk a little bit about the racist element that's within the doctrines, especially like the One West camp and that sort of thing too?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely, John. Just one last thing to finish that, saying even though they might not always be formally educated, they a lot of times are filled with Bible kind of trivia. And so they can throw you off with obscure passages and esoteric interpretations you might not be ready or prepared for. Like you mentioned earlier, John, you said a lot of times from the Old Testament, a lot of Christians, we need to revisit the Old Testament. And so do not underestimate the power of the Hebrew Israelites. And then to answer your question there, my man, what about the racism? So if you're a one Wester Hebrew Israelite, like you just mentioned, and John has seen this because John has been out on the corner by my house. So John personally knows what I'm about to say. If you say something like, you know, that doctrine sounds really racist or something like that, right? They'll say, yeah, so what? God is racist. Read Romans 9. Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. Jacob is a so-called black man. Esau is a so-called white man. Guess what, white man? God hates you and loves us. God is a racist, if you want to put it that way. That's right. And so, you know, they're not a lot of the one Westerners aren't really worried about that label. Or they'll say, well, hey, we're not out here killing anybody. The KKK is a white Christian organization. You're the one killing people. We don't condone violence. We're waiting on Yahushua, at the end of days, which I thought you Christians believe that anyway. Haven't you read the book of Revelation? You believe you're one you ignorantly call Jesus is going to bring the ruckus at the end. So we just believe different about it. But don't you believe that too? So what do you mean? Christianity is the one with the racist problem. That's why you paint white pictures of Jesus. That's why, they go on like that. So, they have their responses. But at the end of the day, I think we should take an empathetic look. Now, when I say empathy and sympathy, that doesn't mean I don't go hard in the paint in a manner of speaking. But I still think we can have empathy and sympathy and still do that. And here's what I mean. Hey, you're about to hit 200 people watching, John. Boom. Is that a lot of people are tired of not having what they view as a proper history and a proper identity. And they feel like the identity that's been given to them is not one filled with dignity. And they feel a lot of times like their history that's been given to them is not one that's filled with dignity, is not one that is filled with dignity. And so there's a search for dignity, and it's very existential. And everyone experiences it to a certain level. But I think, especially within Black America, and today is MLK Day, just study that struggle. The issues are a little more, they're more acute, I think. Some people don't agree, whatever. I do think that's the case. And so Hebrew Israelism says, hey, you're not the scum of the earth. You're the center of this book, the apple of God's eye. He chose you. Jesus, read Revelation 1 right now. Read, that Jesus looked like you, my brother. So there's an instillment and an empowerment that comes along with that may have felt absent before. And so a lot of the archaeology and history, in a way, is window dressing, because once you've got that identity doctrine, you hold on to that for dear life, and you don't want anybody wrestling that away from you. So it takes a mighty act of God to open these men and women's eyes. It does happen. We've seen it time and time again, John. But you got to understand, we're dealing with real spiritual warfare because they feel like a need is getting met that was not met before. And that's a big deal for people. It's a big deal. It makes us tick,
Yeah, and not sure, my end's lagging, so sorry if I'm cutting out and stuff. But one thing that's real interesting about it too is because identity is so wrapped into this belief system, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's not as though they keep their beliefs separate from their identity, you know what I mean, in some sort of way like that. It's really wrapped up into. So the whole Black culture is tied into this doctrine. And what I find interesting about it too is that because of the curses and that sort of thing that they read out of Deuteronomy 28, they see all of the kind of persecution and stuff like this that they say, claim that Black people go through. They blame that on the doctrine. They say that the Bible's fulfilled in that aspect. Is that right, Vocab?
You're saying the Bible's fulfilled,
being persecuted.
Yeah. So they would say that's an example of the curses befalling our people. So here it goes like this. Well, if you don't accept this doctrine, John McCrae, what's your theodicy for the slave trade? How do you account how we're treated in this nation, in this land? I mean, today's MLK Day. You see the pictures out there with little girls and fire hoses and dogs, and you know what happened in 1963, the church bombing. How do you account for that? I have a response, which is this. Our people have not kept the laws, statutes, and commandments laid out in this book given to us by the Most High. And since we have not kept the law, statutes, commandments in this book given to us by the Most High, we're now experiencing communally, collectively, the curses, the judgments laid out in the beginning, in the latter half of Deuteronomy 28. So now Hebrew Israelites feel like they actually have a theodicy as well. Problem of evil explanation, problem of pain, those issues they feel like are actually satisfied because they feel like they have a. Now it's like kind of ironic because you end up kind of blaming the victim or something. You could look at it that way, but nonetheless, they think they have that answered as well, and so they do think that all these things are a fulfillment. And what they say is, what you're going to see is as we begin to build our people back together as a nation, because this nation doesn't want us. We already know that. They'll say you're going to see our people start to achieve and be successful and be the lender and not the borrow anymore. And some of them believe this actually happened in 2019. So there's a lot of Hebrew Israelites who believe that there's a 400-year prophecy given because 400 years of slavery. And they say in 2019, the curses ended. And so no longer will the people be collectively cursed. And so one reading of this prophecy, of this 400-year prophecy, is that now our people, as the true Israelites in America, can actually pray to God again, speak to him, and our captivity is officially ended. And that's why you're going to see new things happening. You're going to see more Black-owned business and stuff like that, they'll say. Because I've talked to these guys, and some of them believe in that. Others believe it's going to be more definitive, like some kind of definitive thing's going to happen. And some are pushing it to August 20th, 2020. And that's the next video I'm working on, doing the kind of video similar to I did about the Jersey shooting. I'm working on one about this 400-year prophecy. So there's a lot of movement in this thing, man.
Yeah. So there's a couple different directions we can go, but what do you? Okay, so let's say this. So why do you think that, like, the average apologist, because this is an issue that's talked about more often in urban apologetics and Black culture, but why do you think that, like, every Christian should be kind of aware of the basics of what's going on with this movement?
Well, I think part of apologetics is fulfilling the two great commands, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So I think actually part of it's loving your neighbor. So you may say, well, that's not relevant to me, but it might be relevant to your neighbor. And that's sort of, a way to scripturally hopefully look at it. But let me approach it another way as well, John. Why should a Christian care about Hebrew Israelism? Especially when a lot of people discount them and say, oh, they're uneducated. Why should, let me break it down this way. Almost every single belief in Hebrew Israelism can be found in another cult or religious group somewhere. This is sort of a greatest hits of heresy, right? And I'll give you examples. Reincarnation is in a lot of Hebrew Israelism. Some Hebrew Israelites don't believe in it, but a large percentage of the guys I deal with believe in reincarnation. Well, that's not unique to Hebrew Israelism. So are you ready to defend when people try to use the Bible to prove reincarnation? Because if you learn how to do it with Hebrew Israelites, then you can also learn how to do it with a New Agey Christian or something like that. Israel only. That's a position distinctive of Hebrew Israelism. If you Google right now, Israel only, religion, cult, something like that, you'll find a whole bunch of people have this strange Israel only position. Hebrew Israelism has that in there as well. Here's another one, Hebrew roots. The Hebrew roots movement is sort of like Messianic Judaism ran wild into the woods, right? And Hebrew roots, which embraces a legalistic doctrine, a lot of times a moralistic, salvation by works and grace, they'll say, alchemy kind of thing, you know what I'm saying? Which goes against Romans 3 and all kinds of biblical passages. Hebrew roots is right there baked into Hebrew Israelism. British Israelism, which was this earlier belief that peoples of Anglo descent are actually the true Israelites. Hebrew Israelism takes a lot of the same arguments, the Anglo-Israelism or British Israelism, depending on what term you use. They take some of their arguments and just flip them around. And so they actually use some identical arguments. So if you deal with the Christian identity today, which is a heresy, a lot of them, some of their arguments are actually similar to Hebrew Israelites. Sacred namers. People believe you got to use a certain name for God. That's a movement that Jehovah's Witnesses are part of. There's all kinds of sacred namers. Hebrew Israelites, a lot of them are sacred namers. They embrace that idea. KJV onlyism. Large percentage of Hebrew Israelites are KJV onlyists. Holding to the Apocrypha is canonical. A lot of Hebrew Israelites hold to the Apocrypha canonical, just like the Roman Catholic Church. My point is, if you notice, everything I've just said is somewhere else. It's over here. It's over there. It's not. And that's The Christology of Hebrew Israelites is almost identical to Jehovah's Witnesses. The anti-Trinitarianism looks like oneness theology a lot of times. So I'm just trying to show that if a person even cares about sort of comparing truth systems and having Hebrew Israelism is still good, because you realize, oh, a lot of this is in other places as well. And there's more I could go, but I'll stop there right there with it, because you also got the preppers and the sovereign citizens and a whole bunch of other stuff that is part of it. And so I think you could see, okay, this isn't as much of a stretch as I thought. I could deal with this. I could talk about some of this, you know what I'm saying? And I just pray Christians have an open mind and open heart towards these folks, even when they act wild, because sometimes Hebrew Israelites will act wild. And John, you've seen it firsthand.
Oh yeah. No, they can act really wild, right? Like the ones we've had interactions with. The last ones weren't that as bad though. The GMS count wasn't as bad, but but anyways, but real quick though, before we get to the next point, shout out to all the super chats. Saw you guys haven't been able to follow as much. My computer just keeps hosing up. My internet's too slow here, I think. But I did see from Sean or Shawnee Gregory, I remember a super chat. Thank you very much. And then also had Doc Funny become part of the meme dream team. So appreciate that.
Shoot.
Yep, and also Google user, of course, was earlier. And then also just got a super chat from Benjamin Handelman. Says, "You're the best, John. Always glad to see you team up with Vocab. Only thing that can make this better be a surprise Mike Winger appearance." Yeah, me and Mike are going to be doing some more stuff here soon. So, but yeah, no, thank you very much for the super chat. And if I remember right, yeah, actually, you're the guy that you bought a shirt recently too. I remember you were asking me questions about it. So hopefully it fits you well. Okay, so back to it. So when we interact with these, so we've had some experiences with these Israelites, and my first impression in interacting with them was like, this is wild, right? Because they were just yelling and, all hyped up, and were just like super, super passionate and intense about it, right? And so like, trying to think if we want to get to like the peak of it, but one thing I noticed is that like, so they'll use the scriptures, but they use them in these ways that a lot of people aren't familiar with. So they'll go to like all these tribes in the Old Testament, and then I'll say, well, who are these people? This tribe in the Old Testament. And then if you who they were, they'd be like, oh, see, he didn't even read the scriptures. See, you don't even know the scriptures, So they'll do that kind of stuff a lot, primarily with those tribes in the Old Testament. The other stuff in the New Testament, Christians are, you can be a lot more familiar with, but be prepared for that kind of stuff sometimes. So because of the tribe. So what kind of advice would you give somebody, Vocab, that's not familiar with these kind of tribes? Is there a way around it, or do you just have to get into the depths of the tribes, or?
I mean, I think it's good if someone's if they're like, hey, I want to talk to some Hebrew Israelites. I want to, you mentioned tribes, the passage that deals with the curses, Deuteronomy 28. I think it's important to eat up everything you can about Deuteronomy 28 to understand that chapter better. Now, some Hebrew Israelites are getting away from using it. They're trying to use other things, but Deuteronomy 28 is important. And the beautiful thing about Deuteronomy 28 is that it's not just sort of relevant to Hebrew Israelism. You realize how central Deuteronomy 28 is to the Old Testament in a lot of ways, because a lot of the Old Testament, John, is Deuteronomy 28 being played out on Israel. Because if you read the prophets, when they come to Israel, all they're doing very frequently is telling Israel to keep her promises, to hold to the covenant. And they'll say, if you don't, here's what's going to happen. This nation's going to swoop in and do this. And they're really just reminding Israel of her past, of her history, of her covenant promises and the loyalty she's supposed to have to Yahweh. And you say, okay, Deuteronomy 28 is important because you see these punishments happening in real time. There's a prediction in Deuteronomy 28, if you want to call it a prediction, really it's a condition of the agreement. If you don't hold to, this will happen to you. That talks about, basically cannibalism is going to happen. That happens in the pages of the Old Testament. So Deuteronomy 28, but really dealing with any group, any cult, any false religion, to be frank with you, the two things are God and the gospel. God and the gospel. So knowing really who Jesus is, understanding basic Trinitarian doctrine to be able to talk about it, and just understanding who God, the character of God, the nature of God. Like, it's really important because these groups they get God wrong. Hebrew Israelites take God away from being the central character of Scripture and then make Israel become the central character of Scripture. Hebrew Israelites take away the fact that people were to worship Yahweh, the triune God in heaven, and they make it the one Westers anyway. Instead, other nations are going to be serving the Hebrew Israelites for all eternity in the kingdom. It's a total replacement of the centrality of God with this false notion of whatever Israel is. So it's a very man-centered view, and that's a problem. Almost all Hebrew Israelites, there's a few exceptions, okay? There's always exceptions to almost every single thing I say about Hebrew Israelites, to be frank with you. But almost all of them are not just but anti-Trinitarian. And that's important. Very few of them affirm the full-bodied, robust, unequivocal, no caveats deity of Jesus Christ. They almost all denigrate it, knock it down to something else, created being, one of many gods, whatever, right? They all do. So God and the gospel, because the gospel is what saves, not your lineage, nothing else. And here's the beauty. Galatians 3:13 says that he became the curse for us. So those curses in Deuteronomy 28, the punishment that Israel and we should be receiving as well, because it's really the punishment of what happens to wicked people. Jesus took that on, 2 Corinthians 5:20. So the important thing to do with Hebrew Israelites is to redirect the conversation to more central things, because if you're not wise, if you're not careful, they'll push your buttons, and next thing you know, you're defending your favorite political party or some practice of your denomination or some doctrinal distinctive that's not fundamental to the gospel. That's why God and the gospel. Now I'm talking about somebody starting out. There's brothers and sisters out there like me and Faithful and K-Dub and Jordan Ortiz, and we're kind of doing different things. We're discussing different topics with these guys and whatnot. But God and the gospel, man, get those down and then your character, because they will try your patience,
Yo, Cap. So my sound keeps cutting out, just so you know. So I missed that last part. I think I broke off about Galatians 13 or Galatians 3:15, I think you quoted, or something like that, right? 3:13, something like that.
It's Galatians 3:13. It's a beautiful, beautiful passage, because Hebrew Israelites are stuck with a very strange job, John, of telling people, hey, we embody these curses. And we're like, well, hold up. Why would you work so hard to be cursed?
Well, see, that's the thing too, is I think the whole book of Galatians should, you know what I mean, is going to be a big problem for them, especially because of the works-based salvation going off of the Old Testament and that sort of thing too. But Vocab, real quick though, before you pick up there, just a couple quick more super chats. David Woods in the house. He says, what's worse, John's beard or Vocab's sunglasses?
Oh, David Wood needs to understand about these sunglasses. By the way, your beard
because it's not bright out there, right? It's bright in there.
No, it's because these are Star Wars sunglasses. Now I know you don't know anything about nerd stuff, but that is the rebel symbol. That's the rebel symbol, John. If you notice, these glasses are white and the blue lenses, they have a blue tint, and the reason is, John, is because these are Star Wars glasses.
And you're Edomite.
And these
said white.
These bro, these glasses are painted like R2D2. See, it says Star Wars right there. Yeah. These are R2D2 sunglasses, man.
Yo, and so my beard, I haven't shaved for a while. My wife won't really let me, but I hope that I don't turn into a Calvinist if this thing keeps growing.
I don't know. I think Calvinists tend to have more respectable, manly beards than whatever you're doing there.
Whatever I got going on. Yo, another super chat from Doc Funny says, I've never seen the Black Hebrew, or he says Hebrew Israelites out in the wild, but you guys always share so much great info. The content that both of you share allows the meme fam team and Team Vocab to be prepared to give an answer. Yo, thank you, Doc Funny. Thank you, David Wood. Appreciate your super chats and support. And David Wood is like, I mean, he's just like our guy, right? Like, by the way, too. And Doc Funny, too. Like, I'm not trying to take away from your support, nothing like that. I'm just saying David Wood actually put us on the map too. So if you guys don't really know who David Wood is in Act 17 Apologetics, check him out. Wood's always taking care of us, so appreciate him. And Doc Funny's always taking care of us too, so appreciate you guys. And then Doc Funny says another super chat. He says Vocab sunglasses are whack and John needs a trim. He does, yeah.
You know, the problem is, I saw somebody in the live chat mention this, John, and I think you and I can definitely agree. The real problem is David Wood looks pathetic and sad with his naked, ugly face right now, and he clearly has beard envy, because if you look, it's just not the same. It's almost like maybe he should not make any videos until his beard grows back, to be honest with you. You know what I'm saying?
He does. I can't take him as serious too when he shaves his beard. That's a problem. From I want to say Shawnee yeah, I think it's Shawnee Gregory.
Sean Gregory. I always say Sean Gregory.
Sean, is it Sean? That's what I was thinking. I couldn't tell if it was Sean or Shawnee. So, but anyway, Sean, appreciate the super chat. It says, could you emphasize the importance of being prepared to give a defense? 1 Peter 3:15 to the live chat. Yes. Vocab, actually, you're the guest. You want to take that?
Wait, what am I taking? What am I doing?
1 Peter 3:15, the importance of giving a defense for the hope that we have.
You know, that's
why is it important? In other words, I think that he's talking in relation to why should anybody pretty much care about talking to the Israelites? Why not just say, well, yeah, they're wrong, and that's it. So leave them alone.
Right. Well, the Apostle Paul says that love compels us. Love compels us, and that's good. And Apostle Paul also talks about being an ambassador, and we're ambassadors who he actually phrases it in such a way that is as if God himself is making an appeal through us, is the way that Paul describes this in Corinthians as well. I believe 2 Corinthians as well. And so that's very, very important to think of yourselves as an ambassador and all that. And, 1 Peter 3:15, which is a beautiful passage. I'll read it real quick. And then I want to give a quick shout out. I'm doing a little miniature study on 1 Peter 3:15 coming up here this Wednesday. So look for that. I'm actually doing a whole breakdown of it. But it says, in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. Now, the other verses around it are important too, but notice how it starts off, in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy. And so that's actually part of the charge, which is basically put Christ first, recognize that he's Lord of all, and then we're prepared to make a defense or give an answer or a response to anyone who asks for the reason for the hope. The ultimate hope is really the resurrection, right? And we want to give reasons for that. And there's one other passage I think that's good that shows the same kind of thing. I remember Jude, everybody. Jude was writing a different kind of letter. He's the half brother of Jesus, right? But he says, basically, I was going to write to you about this, but then I had to write to you instead about how important our salvation is and to contend for the faith once handed down. Basically, Jude was going to do something else, but because of the situation that was writing to the Christians he was writing to, he had to make sure he wrote to them to contend for the faith. That's Jude 3. And then when you look at Colossians, this is the last one I'll read because there's a whole slew of verses I think we should apply to apologetic encounters and endeavors and really witnessing and evangelism. Colossians 4, 5, 6, it says this, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, that means those who are not in Christ, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. So I like that because that's kind of an individualized aspect where the gospel need is ultimate, but you recognize people are different. And so you have a wisdom about you that you know how you ought to answer each person. That's why there's some people I think you should answer more direct and blunt and go at it in a certain kind of way. Other people, and we don't always get it right. And there's other people that you got to really be gentle. You got to be really gentle.
I think, Jesus is a good example of that too, because he would always, the way he talked to the Pharisees is obviously a lot different than the way he talked to like the woman at the well,
Right.
And so, and even like the rich young ruler, so you get to these things, but what you can see what Christ is doing is he's always trying to get to the core of what the issue is for the person and communicating to them in the way that they best understand that they're going to find persuasive. Let's keep moving real quick. Let me just get through these super chats real quick so we can keep going. Doc Funny says, seriously though, love both of you guys. Keep doing what you do, and shout out to Mr. Scruffles. Yeah, in the background, I see him. It's Scruffles.
Oh yeah. He is alive. You know what I realized we need to do, John? And if the beardless wonder is still in the live chat, we need to do a boom boom room where Muhammad meets Mr. Scruffles.
Oh yeah, that's a good.
And we'll just show clips of the dog, and of course, David being a white man, we'll make him be the dog's voice, and he'll be like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And we'll have this conversation where we just show, Mr. Scruffles, and then he'll be voicing over, and I'll be like, can I tell you all the reasons that I hate you? If you were black, I'd have to kill you right now. Where are the, we could do a whole thing, right? I think it'd be pretty epic.
We should actually have Wood do his voice that he always does.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yo, real quick, Believe in Thinkers, my boy Sean, always there. You guys, Sean, go subscribe to Believe in Thinkers too, by the way. That's my boy. Sean's the guy that really helps out with a lot of what I do. So without him, I just couldn't even function. So appreciate him. Believe in Thinkers, he says, love the beards, my brothers. Thank you, brother, man. Real quick, Connor, what's up, Connor? Good to see you, my man. Connor's the one that's at the end of, I think, the last 2 videos I did, if I remember right. He says, knew you were rebel scum, vocab. All joking aside, keep up the good work. Hey, appreciate it, Connor. Let me make sure I got the rest of them.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. He's a thespian.
All right, so let's get back on topic though, man. So now here's a really interesting thing that happened to us. So when I first had my first interaction with the Hebrew Israelites, this was how long ago, vocab? 2 years ago? 3?
Man, it might be, bro. It might be 3 years ago almost.
Yeah, 3 years ago, I think now. Yeah. So we went downtown Phoenix to go meet the Israelites, and we were trying to talk to them, and they just were like super hostile, right? Yelling and stomping around and all this weird stuff, And I had a camera because I was going to video vocab's interaction with the Israelites. And then when they were just like all tripping, they're like, no, you better put that camera down, don't film us or whatever. And we're in the middle of the street, so I know, like, obviously I'm okay to film whatever I want to film, you know what I mean? But out of respect, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll turn it down, you know what I mean? Put it down. And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna take that camera and throw it across the street or something like this. So they were just
he was like getting close to you every time he would say it too.
Yeah.
And he was like a big solid dude, man.
He was, but me and vocab, we're always we're in situations where we're not too afraid, right? I mean, we're in all kinds of crazy situations. Yep. We're not the kind that's that, paranoid about our physical safety and health. We just don't relate to that as much. But anyways, so there was one dude though that was walking around that was really kind of creepy to me, and he caught my eye because I noticed that he was acting kind of weird, and he had this like anger, and then he would start talking randomly and like blow up and then put his head down and start like, kind of being kind of weird. He was just being really weird. And so the camp leader was the guy that was like super hostile, the one that was telling me to put my camera down. But this dude, he was kind of more quiet, and I want to say like he'd have these random outbursts and then he'd kind of go back to quiet.
Yep.
So he's kind of creepy. And then I noticed when I looked on his belt, and he had all these weapons in there, and I noticed he had a gun, and then he had like some metal thing that looks like a chain or something, like maybe it's like goes out to a stick, right? And so
it was a whole Batman utility belt. I don't even know all the weapons that dude had, but yeah.
And that's why I was like, oh, okay, there's something that, that's when I noticed when he had the gun, I was like, something might go down now, because they were all super worked up, right? And so anyways, so then about how long has it been now? About 6 months, a year since we
about 8 months or so that this happened that you're talking about. Not us meeting him, but what you're about to talk about, because I'm a prophet. I know what you're about to say.
Yeah. So at this point, vocab hits me up and he's like, yo, and sends me a news article and talking about something that happened in the news. So vocab, go ahead and fill him in on that.
Well, so that particular guy, the one that seemed the most unstable and who was saying, get that Bible out of here, come back with the right translation, or we're gonna have a problem. And he was like, he's basically yelling and threatening right in my face too, basically saying, I'm gonna beat you up if you don't read from the KJV. That's what he's saying in a very less nice, quiet way. Well, his name was Austin Smith. And one day I saw in the news a situation that was incredibly tragic involving Austin Smith, namely that he murdered, really in cold blood, he accused her of cheating on him, his girlfriend, who some reported as his wife, but my understanding is they weren't actually legally married, and 2 of his 3 daughters. He let the youngest one live, but killed one of them because she was crying that the mom had been shot, and said, hey, the Bible says don't mourn for the death of the wicked, and then killed her, shooting them. And then the last one, I guess he beat with blunt force, like his fist in a baseball bat. Really gruesome. one of the homicide detectives who came in there on the scene said it was the worst scene he had ever saw. Well, he was a Hebrew Israelite, the very same Hebrew Israelite, John, you're talking about. And there's some video of us interacting with this guy. Not some of the most extreme parts, because we didn't get all of it on video because the guy got to try to take our camera. But 3 people were dead out of his family, but he wasn't done yet. He drove then away from his own residence to the residence of where his camp leader and a fellow camp member stayed at, and accused one of them of being the person that his wife was cheating on. And the one guy named Ronnie Freeman, he was the really large guy with the glasses, the biggest one, who was very quiet. He kind of seemed like a gentle guy, actually. He seemed like a good guy, I don't know if you remember his demeanor.
I talked with him for a while, by the way, too. Yeah. But anyways, go ahead.
He's a veteran.
Talk about that later.
Ronnie Freeman is his name. He is a veteran and just seemed like he was caught up in a bad religion, But when Austin Smith, that's not his Hebrew Israelite name, said this, Ronnie said, "Man, you're crazy." And he turned around to go back into the house, I guess. And Austin Smith shot him in the back and murdered him. And then went and tried to, I guess, kill the other people. He injured his camp leader and another woman who was inside. And then he was driving or something. The cops got him. But it was shocking. And all the papers were reporting God told him to do this. But when I actually read it, and I talked to some people who were in some ways involved, because I wanted to try to understand this the best I could, he was saying, what he was really saying is God said this was okay for him to do this, because he said he was enacting basically Old Testament punishment for adulterers on his wife. Now, even that's not even true, because you have to have witnesses and all this kind of thing. It's not just some guy randomly executing. And what would be the reason for the daughters? But the crazy thing is, this is a Hebrew Israelite we directly interact with who did threaten and was pretty violent and actually committed violence. And this was literally outside my house. You remember how close this location was where they were. Now, not the murders. The murders didn't happen there, but where they set up every Saturday. It was really literally right beside my house.
Yeah. And Vocab. So I remember at this same time, because when I saw them, they were so wild, and on all this, I was like, these dudes got to be violent, right? You know what I mean? I was like, are they killing a lot of people and stuff like that? And you were told me, you're like, no, they haven't really been killing people yet, but it will get there, right? And since then, I mean, talk about being like a prophetic word. I'm not saying that seriously, but you were right about that, though, because actually from 2019 to 2020, you told me there's been a stream, right? We've been seeing it in the news and stuff like that. And how do you say there was like 14 or something like that?
That we know of, and it depends how you count. If you count the assailants and different things like that, but it from approximately 6 or 7 Hebrew Israelites from December 2019 to December 2018 to December 2019. From there to there, in that 12-month window, we have about 12 to 13 people dead at the hands of 6 or 7 Hebrew Israelites. Yeah. And I did a show on this where I talked about this and named all the names. So this is a very real thing. And now Hebrew Israelites who are watching this will be upset with me. But the thing is, you're asking this because you have a special connection, because you literally met Austin Smith and were out there. And your very first encounter with a Hebrew Israelite, it's very ironic that you actually ended up meeting a man who would become a murderer. So it's not like you're not going to talk about it, because that's your first experience with the Hebrew Israelites. And so, that's going to stay with you. But this isn't all I do. I'm not out to paint them a picture of terrorists. And in fact, I do want people to understand they are not like Salafi Muslims. And what I mean by that is this real quick. It's not a terrorist organization, whereas ISIS is like an official Islamic organization. I'm not saying all Muslims think they're doing a good thing. I'm not saying, but everything they do is Islamic. It's official. They want to establish a caliphate. They're going by certain protocols and historical precedents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These Hebrew Israelites who do some of the stuff we've been talking about, they're usually rogue outliers or guys who've been rejected out of the camps. But the problem is, and I've said this before, when you fantasize violence, don't be surprised when it becomes actualized. Yeah. And that's what's happening.
Too, is like a lot of people probably unfamiliar with Vocab. Real quick, try to keep it like real short because we're kind of getting low on time. But
Okay.
they actually are okay fantasizing like, killing white babies and this sort of thing too, right? So the ones that aren't violent, a lot of times they hold these kind of fantasies. Is that right?
The one Westers do. The one Westers will say, and remember everybody, one Westers, they it's not just white folks, it's Arabs, Asians, Indians, as in from the East, not Native Americans, but Indians, and Africans. Because remember, they don't think they're Africans. They think all those folks are going to be their slaves, and they fantasize about killing all of them. The one Westers. Now, I see my brother. When I say brother, I don't mean brother in the Lord, but I mean brother in humanity, because I guess I need to differentiate that. But Brother Renzo, who I respect and like, Renzo Robertson, he's a Hebrew Israelite. He's in the live chat. He is generally a respectful, peaceable person. I'm sure he would disavow all the stuff and say, yeah, that's extreme stuff. That doesn't represent things. What about the things in Christianity? He might even bring up some of that. You know what I'm saying? He's being pretty chill here. Today he's not doing any of that, but he would say that doesn't represent my experience. That's not what Israel's all about. Those are bad seeds. And a lot of Israelites actually think it's a government operation to make them look bad. I'm not saying Renzo said that, but a lot of them actually think these are false flags and government plans and agents who are not actually real Israelites. And I've even heard some of them, and I kid you not, say Austin Smith might have been under MK Ultra governmental mind control. And so some of them even will say, so MK Ultra is supposed to be this idea of controlling people's minds. The government is supposed to be able to do and all this. So you do have a conspiracy theory aspect that runs with some of these folks. But just know, Renzo Robertson, he's here. He's not like that. Now, I still need to debate him. I don't literally mean we need to have a debate, but I'm saying him and I still have a lot to discuss, just like I would have with a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon. You know what I'm saying? About his doctrine that I think is problematic. But that doesn't mean that I think he is a violent person in his heart, per se, like the one Westers are in the way you know is because they say it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I hope that kind of shed some light onto that earlier super chat about 1 Peter 3:15, or like why or actually the earlier question about like why should we be trying to save these people? Because if we were able to get through with the gospel to somebody like Austin Smith, then it could have prevented something as serious as that, right? Because it's literally under a delusion, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So, real quick, another super chat. We got one from Modern Day Debate, my boy. Modern Day Debate. So, hey man, good to see you. Of course, you got to come kick it sometime soon, man. I know we've been busy, but he just moved to not too far from me, like 45 minutes. So you got to come kick it, man. Good to see you, James. And then Benjamin Hadelman, super chat. Thank you very much. Says everyone go join What Do You Memes Patreon to help support John. Also make sure to buy a shirt, but go up 1 or 2 sizes. The logo looks even better in person. Yo, thank you very much, man. Appreciate that shout out too. And I just appreciate that. Thanks for the love and support. So, Vocab, we're going to kind of close here pretty soon. But what I want to make sure too, by the way, if you guys have questions, by the way, you can start sending them in now. If you have a kind of holes or things you don't understand about their doctrine, those are the questions that I really want to get to. If you guys don't understand about their doctrine, because I want everybody to leave this live stream with having just kind of like a basic idea of what they believe, you know what I mean, and kind of why. So you guys send the questions in, we'll do that. And we got a lot of people from the Meme Dream Team in the house too, by the way, the channel memberships. If you guys are on the Meme Dream Team, go ahead and send an emoji. I'm just kind of curious how many of you guys are in there. You send the what do you mean emojis, the ones of me doing something. So Vocab, and my headphones just keep cutting out, so I don't know what's up with that. But when you were talking about the story of Austin Smith and how he murdered his family and that sort of thing, did you explain the reasoning behind it?
Yeah, which was the news media didn't understand it. They thought it was like some visionary experience or something like that. He was saying God is okay with what he did because since he holds to, this is his explanation, the Old Testament in a biblical way, since he knows, even though he didn't know, his wife was cheating on him, that she deserved the death penalty.
That's right, yeah.
And then, but he clearly something was wrong with his process nonetheless, because, he murdered 2 of his young little girls. He had these precious little girls And I saw the grandmother there in the news reports just bawling her eyes out. She's just devastated. And then the one girl that was left freaking was in foster care. Now I pray they've got her back, because I don't know why they didn't just, if the grandma was ready, why would they give this anyway? Sorry, it's it's happened here in Phoenix, but the main reason was that. But a lot of Hebrew Israelites will say, that's the kind of stuff that will happen under the righteous kingdom in the future. The One West Hebrew Israelites, the guys on the corner, they'll say that's going to happen in the future, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, one guy told me, this isn't a debate, John. This is not on the corner. This is in a radio debate. Imagine calling in to an atheist show and having the atheist tell you, because the atheist would never say this, but this guy said this. Vocab, you're going to be happy in the kingdom to make my coffee. You're going to be happy, Vocab, to get my water. You want to know why, Vocab? Remember, this is a debate between him and I. Because you're going to want to live. That's what that was his punch. That was his punchline. His name's Tazariak. Captain Tazariak said that. It's just like, what do you do in a debate? That's part of someone's debate point to you. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, so real quick, we're going to get into a couple of these questions here while we have time. But I do want to stress the importance of people understanding too how everything ties in. It's like Islam in a way where in Islam, everything is submitted, but with this, it's different because the identity is crucial. If you're Black, then you have, then that, depending on the count, right? So even if we're just talking about One West, then if you're the type of Black that came over to America during the slave trade, not the Africans, because the Africans weren't brought over on a ship, so they don't qualify. But because of that, then you have salvation, but you don't have salvation if you're white. In other words, too, you're actually an Edomite, is what they call them, and then so you're considered under God's curse, and God hates white people. They would say, like Esau, and then Black people, God loves, right? So that's why it's so interesting, because it really dwells really deep into making in their minds, it makes sense of a lot of the persecution that Black people had to go through and that sort of thing too. But Vocab, real quick, there's a question from Troy. 831 says, how do Hebrew Israelites believe they are justified? That's through the law, right?
Yeah. Some of them have become a little more slick at answering this, like the Sakari. Now they'll say, yeah, we're saved by grace through faith. And we're like, wait, what? Now, when you really break down what they mean, they still have what I call soteriological alchemy going on, which is a mixture. Because even the Roman Catholic Church, no offense to the Roman Catholic folks in the live chat, I'm not trying to diss you, but I'm just saying they'll agree with the Protestant reformers that grace is needed for salvation. The question is grace alone. That qualifier at the end makes all the difference in the world. And just like the people who signed off on the Council of Trent, most Hebrew Israelites cannot agree when they really break it down, when you really have a discussion about it, that it's grace alone, faith alone. And so that's what you end up with. Now, we got to remember, everybody. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, no, I think that's an important thing too, because if you can make the distinctions with the gospel, then you can handle a lot of these different cults too, because there's a lot of Christians that would say, well, it's grace through, it's grace alone, but if you have grace, then you have all these works, and then you're kind of still mixing in a lot of the times, I want to say, but that's a different kind of topic that we can talk about another time maybe. But go ahead, Vocab, you're finishing that thought.
Well, just again, this is similar. That I'll say this, with all due respect to the Hebrew Israelites in the live chat and watching this, there's such a lack of emphasis on salvation, because salvation a lot of times in Hebrew Israelism becomes a very physical deliverance kind of thing, versus really understanding that we need to be justified, which is made right, declared right in God's sight. We need to have Christ's righteousness imputed in our behalf. Even 2 Corinthians 5:20 is one place I would go to talk about that doctrine. But when you look at that reality, a lot of them place so little emphasis on it that their soteriology, that's their doctrine of salvation, is not even very clearly worked out. It's very difficult to find videos about the gospel that really define the gospel in any kind of biblical sense. A lot of Hebrew Israelites of the One West variety define the gospel as being part of the gospel equals that we're going to have slaves in the kingdom. And they have a little trick. They do that. But again, you got to remember, that's the One Westers. Non-One Westers would say, well, yeah, white people and Asians, they're not chosen by God, but they can still be grafted in as long as they follow the proper protocol, and they can be righteous just like us, and they can keep the law, and they'll be able to serve God with us. So that's why it's important to understand not all Hebrew Israelites are the same. So you just got to ask them where they're at. Like Kabir, two of his friends were recently arrested, and I don't want to explain the whole story, but he's the former NFL player. Both of his friends adopt Hebrew Israelism in their ideology. However, they're both white. He calls them his brothers. And so if you saw those guys, you might go, wait a minute. I thought Vocab said they were involved with Hebrew Israelism. They are, but Straightway practices a non-One West version. You got to understand that. So don't be thrown off when you see, white or other traditional looking members. And Hebrew Israelism is going to diversify. So you're going to see more and more of this. Because when something grows, it diversifies,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because that threw me off when I saw that they said, yeah, you can have some white ones. They said David Wood might be an Israelite GMS, right?
Yeah. Theirs is a little bit different. They think that he still is an Israelite, not actually a non-Israelite. So Kabir and them would say the white guys might not be Israelites, but they are spiritual Israelites or something like that. GMS is saying David Wood might actually be an Israelite because he beatboxes well. They're saying that'd be a sign, but he just, because of the diaspora, David Wood's parents have been sort of, there's been a process where you keep on having these women who are non-Israelites, and by the end, you look like one of the other nations. It's actually called the confusion of face doctrine. The confusion of face doctrine.
This is nuts. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yo, so question real quick from Mr. Rich B.O.B. By the way, if you guys have a question for me, like I said, I want you guys to understand kind of the basics. I want you to leave here kind of understanding the basics. So if you have any questions, tag what do you meme in it. So that way I can see it. It'll stand out. So tag what do you meme. But this one says, what do you meme in vocab? How often have you seen Black Hebrew Israelites claim that King James, I think he's want to say, was the first black man, I think is what he's, all right. I mean, was first. Oh, the first was black. Oh, King James the first was black. I've seen it rather common that they believe him and all his famous rulers were black. Have you seen that, Vocab?
Again, so this is One Westers. Not all Hebrew Israelites would believe this. We've been trying to figure out exactly how they arrived at this doctrine, and it seems like it was a weird progression. And we think it might have went something like this. We affirm the King James Version of the Bible as being the authoritative Bible, but yet we got this white guy's name on it. And what are we going to do about this non-Israelite being in charge, even though he really wasn't? Well, it depends how you define that, but of this translation that we hold to. Well, guess what? We've looked into it, and look at this picture. King James actually looks like Lando Calrissian. This is how he really looked. And if you look at his last name, Stewart, it can mean black and all this kind of stuff. And so the One West Hebrew Israelites, they actually have a whole alternative history for a lot of the world. It's an alt history. Yeah. But it's interesting. I've been studying recently more the KKK. The Klan has a total revisionist history of their own. They have a whole narration that they've worked out about what they believe about history that's bizarre, includes all kinds of clearly false things that they believe about history, right? Hebrew Israelites, I'm not saying they are the Klan. They never lynched anybody, okay? I'm just saying that this is a common thing for some of these idiosyncratic kind of religious groups or cults to do, is create this alternative history that sort of justifies their theology. And the One Westers, one thing they do is say the Dark Ages are called the Dark Ages because Europe at the time was ruled by a black aristocratic class who was in charge of Europe, and King James was one of the last of those rulers. And if you laugh at that idea, they'll say, that's just your white European racism coming out because you don't think that black folks could rule anything or could be in charge, or you're upset about the idea of black royalty ruling over non-black subjects. That's a real reason you don't agree with this. You know what I'm saying? So it becomes fraught with minefields. But at the end of the day, we have paintings of King James painted that he commissioned by his contemporaries that clearly show he was a fair-skinned man. And I'm not trying to claim King James. I'm not English or Scottish or Irish or anything else. I don't really care. Like that's just, it is what it is with that. But
it's not even just King James, right? I mean,
there's a bunch.
Paul. And don't they think Paul was Jamaican? Is that right?
Well, the One Westers have a 12 tribes chart, like you mentioned briefly earlier, and Benjamites, of which Paul was of the tribe of Benjamin. Benjamites are equated with modern day Jamaicans. So in an anachronistic way, I think I mispronounced that word, but hopefully people know what it means. You could say Paul was a Jamaican. In fact, one time a Hebrew Israelite was debating K-Dub, who was in the live chat earlier, and he literally said Paul was a Jamaican.
Yeah.
So
and then with Jesus, they're going to point to Revelation. That's what they usually always point to. Revelation 1, right, where it talks about his hair is like wool, his feet were brass, or what's the passage?
Right. So in Revelation, there's two places where you have this kind of there's a few places, but when you go to Revelation 1, you have the glorified, exalted Jesus speaking to John to speak to the 7 churches there in Asia Minor. And you have this very deified, glorified picture of Jesus. And it describes his hair as being white like wool, white like snow. It describes him having a golden sash and standing in the midst of golden lampstands and holding stars in his hands and having swords come out of his mouth and having a flame of fire in his eye and having a voice that sounded with the rushing of many waters and feet that were like bronze or brass that burned in a fire. And this whole description, right? And when you in a face that's shining bright like the sun. Well, exegetes have understood that all of that symbolism is from the Old Testament. And all you got to do is match up each one, and each one has a meaning. But when you add it all up together, and I've done breakdowns of this before, when you add it all up together, it's saying Jesus is deity, but it's also saying he's king and he's priest, he's prophet, priest, king. And it's saying all that about him. And this is not Jesus during his earthly ministry on a Saturday night. Let's say Sunday night, since he might not be going anywhere on Saturday night. But it's not the description. This is the description of the risen Lord Jesus, and it's not describing his ethnicity. It's describing his deity, his glory. And all you got to do is break it down. It doesn't say, like they want you to think, his hair was like wool, because they'll make it like as if it's a description of the texture of his hair, right? It says hair is white like wool, white like snow. What's that describing? The color, almost like this. Your mom is so fat. How fat is she? Right? His hair was so white. How white was it? White like wool, white like snow. Okay? It's and same thing with the feet. They'll say, oh, look, so you have burnt feet. When you burn something, it turns black and crispy. First of all, nobody's skin tone looks like that. You know what I'm saying? Second of all, that's not what it's saying. It's saying it's as if his feet, and you can see it in the Greek grammar, but it's as if his feet burned, not as if they were burnt and then done, meaning they're burning right now. And what does burning metal look like as it burns? White or golden, yellow, orange, which matches up all the other picture images of him if you read the passage in its entirety. So here's all I'm trying to say. Jesus wasn't a European man. I did a talk last year at Doctor for the Block called Say Adios to Jesus. Say adios to white Jesus. He didn't look Nordic. He wasn't white or fair. There's no way he was, right? It'd be like historically improbable unless he was like an albino or something. It'd be just impossible, right? But to say he looked like someone from sub-Saharan Africa, which there's nothing wrong with that, and that's part of the problem is people have almost brought this idea that there's something wrong with that. It's just what did people look like in that day and time? And we've got all kinds of evidence from other descriptions of people to things written on walls to coinage, and the list goes on. And you say, well, he probably looked like these other people, his neighbors, and you end up with muddy brown, dark olive toned people who look somewhat similar to a lot of people in that area of the world today. So he's not black or white because the world's not black and white. You know what I'm saying? Michael Jackson wasn't right about that. Maybe he was right, depending on how to say
it. Hey, now I got another question. Try to keep this one about a minute, if you can. But yeah, I know this is going to be hard to keep low, but see what you can do.
I'll do it.
This one's from Old Hickory 12. You say what?
I'll do it. Okay, I'll do it. Go.
Word. Okay, so this is from Old Hickory 12. It says, besides confusion of the face doctrine, what are other things that the one West camps disagree with each other on?
ISUPK thinks it's okay for women to wear pants. The other camps don't. IUIC.
Wait. When you say that, what do you got to clarify that.
What do you mean?
So,
well, I was trying to be quick.
So when you say they're not allowed to wear pants, what do you mean? They got to wear like no pants, or they got to wear something other than pants?
Yeah, dresses and things of that nature.
Okay.
They would say that, you know, the other camps, the One West camps, would say women have to dress this way. ISUPK says women can wear women's pants, and they go to the mat over that. That's a difference. That's one difference. Another big difference is ICGJC, one of the camps, the guy who leads them, who is actually getting a sentence handed down to him, I think today, so it probably already happened, January 20th, named Tazadakia. He claims to be the Holy Spirit made manifest. The other camps don't agree that Tazadakia is the Holy Spirit made manifest. One other example, IUIC, the purple and gold guys, they don't believe you should have more than one wife. They don't believe in polygyny. But most of the other camps hold that you can have more than one wife, like GMS. So there's multiple differences between the One West camps, because they used to all be together, but since they split off in the mid-90s, they develop all these idiosyncratic differences between them based upon their leaders' whims.
And they don't necessarily have like a really defined theology or doctrine or something that they all kind of subscribe to. Besides the two things that you mentioned on the beginning of this episode, but other than that, you know.
You got somebody in here you got one of these white Egyptian advocates, Templar Bear, telling me that Nefertiti was white. This is a common old thing. It always cracks me up. It's kind of funny because when you speak about these issues, nobody's happy with you, because the Hebrew Israelites are like, you're saying they want him to look a certain way, and these guys like Templar Bear, they want the Egyptians to be white. They think these Templar Bear and people like him, they think the portrayal of the Egyptians in the Ten Commandments was actually accurate, basically. But no, the Egyptians weren't white. I mean, bro, Templar Bear, have you seen the paintings from the first century when the Egyptians painted themselves when they died? The Fayum mummy portraits? What would be your response to those? And have you seen when the Egyptians show themselves next to the Nubians or the Cushites, depending on what term you want to use? The Egyptians are dark, but they're not as dark as the Nubians or Cushites. But when you put them together, you see, well, they're still dark. So I just don't know. These people that want to try to make all the Egyptians white, usually out of some less than ideal view they have about certain racial issues, I'll just say it that way. That's another form of revisionist history, to turn the Egyptians into a bunch of Caucasians. But if you want to do that, have at it.
So we're about to wrap up. So you guys know, so a couple things too. So just kind of keep you guys in the loop. Everybody knows, well, I mean, a lot of you might know that I'm working on right now transitioning into full-time ministry. So if you guys do like the channel, want to support the channel, then go ahead and go to my Patreon account. The link is in the description. And it would be greatly appreciated, because we're getting closer and closer to be there. And I'm planning on, we're getting close there. We're really close. So I'm really excited about that. So please, if you guys feel so inclined to do so, go ahead and go there. Also, check out Vocab Malone's book called Barack Obama versus the Black Hebrew Israelites. And Vocab, where can they get this book?
It's on Amazon at a place called The Book Patch, thebookpatch.com or amazon.com. And you can also get it if you go to an event, like we're doing Doctrine for the Block up here in Phoenix in February. For example. Yeah, what's up? I was just going to say, so people that come to Phoenix, you can get it directly from me if you come that. But go ahead, bro.
I was going to say, you didn't invite me to Doctrine on the Block, bro. What's up with that?
Well, it's mainly because we don't have money to pay for speakers.
Oh, I
Can't
see.
can't really fly them out.
Oh, it's all good, man. You could have just hollered at your boy. You know what I mean? Because you're my boy. I could have
Oh,
been there for you,
okay.
man.
All right,
Could have let
wait.
me know.
All right, I'm gonna mark that down because
Yeah.
well, this is the second year of doing it, and we plan on doing the third year. So, 2021, John McCrae, Sam Shamoon, David Webb, Vocab, boy, we better have some tight security.
Yeah, we right. I know that's right. But yeah, man, no, when I'm full time, bro, we're gonna be. I'm good on that. Hey, Tippy Bear, thank you very much for the super chat. Says God bless you. Thank you very much. God bless you too. If you guys aren't subscribed to Vocab Malone's channel, go subscribe to his channel. Vocab's always putting out content on Black Hebrew Israelites, and he's really, it seems to me at least, is one of, if not the, but one of the main voices when it comes to the Black Hebrew Israelites. You don't hear too many people that are putting out consistent stuff with them, especially in a palatable way. Vocab's talking to them all the time, going to discuss them. Most of them are afraid to even debate Vocab, you know, which is a good sign, of course, because every time we go, they're like, we don't want to talk to you. We don't want to talk to you, Vocab. And we got the cops called on us for going. What was the last time we went? They called the cops on us. It was funny. So actually, we got to tell this story real quick, don't we? so we're in, where were we in San Diego, right? Is that where we're in New York?
We were just outside of San Diego when they called the cops on us. Yeah.
That's right. Okay. So we were outside of San Diego. We go over like, oh, okay, there's a camp up here. So we're going to go talk to them. You know what I mean? And then we'll just go interact with them. You know what I mean? Talk to them and stuff. And so there was a few that were walking down the street, and they saw us when we were walking down the street to their camp. Right. And then so when we finally get there to the camp, they were already inside, locked the doors, shut the blinds, right? And then so we're just like, okay, I guess they were just afraid to talk to us, so we're just gonna go ahead and just shoot a video outside of their headquarters, because you can see the sign in the background, right? So we're start shooting the video, and then like in the middle of the video, Vocab was filming me and David Wood, asking us questions about it. And behind us, you can see this little blind creep down, right? So we're like, what? We're like, so we turn around and we're like, they're playing peekaboo with us. So we turn around and we're like, hey, yeah, you guys, we want to talk or whatever. You guys want to have a conversation or something like that. I think we're like, hi, or something like that. And then they were like, you know, and then they like shut the blind real quick. And then you can see them still peeking again and stuff too, right? And so it was just funny because we're like, why are they playing peekaboo with us, right?
I
like,
always feel like somebody's watching me.
And like, I mean, what could be the worst that could happen, right? You know what I mean? Like you're having a conversation. But anyways, so then we just leave, you know what I mean? Because it was just funny anyway. And then we leave. Then as we're driving away, we see all the cops roll up, because they called the cops on us. You know what I mean? Which is cowardly, which is so funny because it's like the Israelites have always been afraid of Vocab anyway. Every time I go with them too, they're afraid to talk with them. You know what I mean? For the most part, you know. And then so it's just funny that they decided to call the white man, who they're always against, right? Call the man to try to save them. So anyways, that was a really funny time.
Yeah, IUIC is interesting. That's their official policy, though. It's a deal with me specifically that way. So there's a few videos where I'm trying to talk to IUIC and they're doing stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Well, that's because they're afraid. I mean, obviously. But even then, I mean, you just think about what would it take for me to call the cops on somebody, right? It wouldn't take them just trying to debate me, right? You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Or even just have a conversation, you know what I mean? But anyways,
well, they're all like, police, there's somebody outside our window shooting. And then they get there, shooting video.
So yeah. So anyways, it's just funny. So anyways, yeah. So anyways, you guys go subscribe to Vocab's channel. Yo, Cab, it's always good to see you, my dude. I can't wait to see you again, man. In person at the next whatever we do. It's good to see you, man. So
well,
yeah, thanks for coming on.
I mean, there's a certain. I mean, you know when we're gonna see, you know when we're gonna see each other next, right?
I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Yeah, I forgot about that.
I mean,
I'll see you in a couple of weeks
for the secret.
We got some
take over the world meeting we're gonna have.
That's gonna be dope, and we got so much stuff that we're looking forward to. That's why I'm stoked that God is actually you know, really working with this ministry to bring it into full time, so that way we can actually do this stuff. You know what I mean? So right now I'm exhausted all the time, but it's all good. This is the home stretch right here. You know what I mean? So and I've been sick for a long time too. I think Wood's sick too. We've been doing a lot of videos and stuff. But anyways, thank you all so much for joining. It's always good to see you guys. Love you guys. Thank you so much for the support. And you guys make sure you get Vocab Malone's book, Barack Obama versus Black Hebrew Israelites, and keep an eye out for his next book. When he's done with that, we'll be doing our interviews about that. That book's out too. And Vocab, anything you want to say to everybody before you go?
If you can't come to Doctrine for the Block, which you're doing here in Phoenix, February 7th through 9th, I get it. It's all good. Stick around and look for March 20th to 21st. I'm doing the first that I know of all virtual internet apologetics conference called Cyber City. So it's going to be focusing a lot on urban apologetics, no doubt, but I think it's going to be pretty dope. It's called Cyber City. I'm real excited about it because this is our first year doing it. So be sure to check that out.
Thanks again for the invite, bro. Thanks again for the invite. That's two.
Oh, you want to come to Cyber City too?
I mean, I'm sitting at home, bro. No, I was just messing with you.
All right. Well, I didn't know you. I didn't know you're interested in urban apologetics, bro.
Oh, well, come on, bro. Come on, man. Let me teach the gospel. That's what I want to do. No, I'm messing with you. But yeah, when is that server? Did you set that one up yet all the way?
Yeah, March 20th to 21st.
Dope. Oh yeah.
I mean, I got some ideas, bro. If you're serious for that one, I could actually make something happen. I got some ideas. We'll have to talk.
We'll talk about it, man. We'll talk about it.
Because having you around will always help. Because you got the meme team.
The meme team.
That's right.
So, but yeah, we'll talk about that, man. But what else? Anything else you want to push, promote, talk about?
I mean, that's the big stuff, man. Sanctity of Life Sunday was yesterday and all that. So if you check out my channel right now, you'll find the last 3 or 4 uploads have had to do with abortion and pro-life issues. So that's what I do. But a lot of what I do is Hebrew Israelites. Do a lot of stuff with Islam, and look at David Wood's puny little channel because we just recorded a video and he said it's supposed to drop today, but I have a feeling he was listening to us instead of working on editing of Muhammad meets Jeffrey Epstein. I wrote the script. I'm very proud of how disturbing it is. And I wrote it and I'm proud of it, and it's awful and horrible and hilarious, and I can't wait for it to drop. Yeah,
buddy. Vocab, always good to see you, my man. Thanks for coming on. And everybody in the meme team, good night. I'll see you guys this week. I'll see you guys this week. All right.
Peace be upon me.